Brandi and I have a super fun evening session to share with you and to be in community with you, and hoping as you come on, this is really less about me and Brandi and more about the collective wisdom here and having a community experience. So when you feel ready, if you want to show your beautiful faces or enter the chat, let us know where you're coming from. Um, please do so. Say hi.
Mm. Welcome, Alafia, everyone. We are in abundance. Definitely want to see your faces. Y'all know it's the end of the evening. Who knows if you're in the East Coast, it's really late in the evening. So just welcome. Yay. I see.
Hey. And if you haven't already, I'm sure you're getting yourselves comfortable, but if you need to, get a cup of tea, put your feet up, grab a snack, final little like bio breaks. We'll take a few minutes here just to get settled, and then we'll go right in. Got folks coming from Portland, Nipmuc territory, Rochester. I'm coming in from the land of the Southern Pomo, coastal Miwok, otherwise known as Sonoma County, California.
Mhm. I am coming in from Tuolumne County from Miwok Territory here in California. New York is in the building. Give thanks, y'all. It's late in the evening. How's the heat wave? I heard it was going on.
Y'all been having a heat wave out there? We've been having
Mm,
a fog wave over here.
oddly cool, some would say.
Nice. Big storm came in. Oh, nice. Finally broke. That must feel so good.
Oh, greetings, Keena from Allensworth.
Woo! Allensworth in the house. Yeah.
So, giving thanks for the rain.
Mm.
Welcome, welcome. Mhm. Just reminding folks, like Erik said, get you some water. We want to be hydrated so we're not irritated. It's important. Human species, get your cup.
So before we kind of officially get into the conversation, what I would love, oh, wait, hold on one sec here. Scratch that. I got to be ready. All right, just a couple things to help set the tone. So to set the tone, everyone, I just want to remind us that we are nature working for nature or possibly against nature. But one of the foundations of what we're here to talk about, to embrace, to become is an immunological response to an earth in crisis. And we're not going to speak a ton about climate change and the crisis. We're stepping into an understanding that we're all more or less on the same page, that there are dire catastrophes happening out there. But we can be that immunological response that can step forward, take action, design a new world, heal the planet and each other. And that's the premise. That's the kind of the space that we want to move in. And I want to remind everybody that to understand how powerful you are, it could be really difficult, especially with the size and scale of some of the problems that we face on planet right now, whether it's political or economic, whether it's war or ecological catastrophe, it can feel overwhelming. It can feel huge. And it can feel like we're powerless. But the truth is, you are nature. You are nature with the ability to rearrange nature. More than almost any other species, we are nature with the ability to rearrange nature. That is immensely powerful. Even if you're doing it just in your backyard, or if you're doing it in your city, or you're doing it in your community, whatever scale, what works for you with the context of your life, the resources that you have, the physical body that you have, those acts to rearrange nature in such a way to either be of benefit, to support the processes of the planet and the community, or to be destructive. These are these are the kind of questions that we are going to talk about is how can we design for abundance? How can we design the world for abundance? And so just in the chat, um, just just take a moment, just center yourself, feel yourself sitting where you're sitting or standing, take a breath, just feel that life enter your body and the gift of giving it back. And just ask yourself, what does abundance look like? What does abundance look like to you? What does abundance look like for the world? And just take a second and ask that question. And as you start to come up with some ideas, share it in the chat. Please share it. This is a community process. What does abundance look like for you? What does abundance look like for the world?
Eric, when I hear you talking, you said look like, and instantly I thought, what does it smell like and
Mm,
taste like, and what does it feel like? All of that came with it for me when you said, what does it look like? I started to have the other things too.
thank you. All the senses.
Hmm.
What is abundance dream? If abundance had a dream, what would that be? Uh, enough food, enough for everyone with more to share, beautiful gardens, hope in the future for all, buoyancy, ability to embrace, joy, fulfillment, and then some.
Hmm. Being surrounded by people who care for each other deeply.
Mm.
Yes. Being surrounded by people who care for each other. Yeah, is the norm.
Mm.
Ease.
Calmed nervous system. Let's call that in. Woo-wee. Mm,
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
mm. Owning our time again.
My mind. Been a long time. Mm, mm. I'll say you had the woman, the womb, corn. There's all kind of stuff there to said abundance. I mean, we can pull that out, right? Someone said, I saw a woman walking corn. Okay, there's total abundance there.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, Brandy, when we ask this question of what abundance looks like, and with the work you do in the world and the way you show up for your community, how do you how does that emerge inside of you? And how do you put that into action?
Mm. Oh, that's a big question. Well, given thanks, I do at work, the work I do in community, I think about the abundance always lies in the idea of the biodiversity, of the idea of having, there's many different hands, but really we make the one for the system. And so when I think about some of the work that I do in community and I think about abundance, I think about the idea of how we're stacking functions in everything that we're doing. And we were just, again, before you all got on, Eric and I were talking, and I'm hearing this idea of the work of waste. Um, I guess I should give a little introduction to, is it, you said the work I do in the world, I should be a little bit more poignant. I'm so grateful because Charles, my one of my teachers of permaculture is on the call. I know he's in the backdrop, but if it's exciting to check in and can still stay connected. I'm a mother of three melanated magical daughters. I have the really wonderful privilege to design permaculture and biomimicry, thinking about how do we change our social framework, right? Thinking about our policies and programs, and how do we think about this from our design of a permanent culture lens. When we think about permaculture, I want us to think about this Afro-Indigenous mindset. So in permaculture, we say people care, earth care, fair share. And if we were to add another lens, we would say Ubuntu, Sankofa, 7 generations. Ubuntu, I am because you are. People care. Fair share, Sankofa, we go back and fetch it. We're standing on the shoulders of our ancestors and the 7 generations as we think further. And so I'm grateful to be the co-founder of the Butterfly Movement, which is a nonprofit organization working with women and girls to help them develop personally, professionally, but really, who's our teacher? Eric opened up with it. We're using nature. We're going back to what we know as the original teacher. She's been here 3.8 billion years, and we believe we can learn a thing or three. So I'm grateful to lead that group and pack of women that are thinking about how to redesign a world that works for everyone, starting with ourselves and letting it then go out into the world.
That's so beautiful. Every time you share like that, Brandy, I just get all like misty because where it feels, I don't know how many folks here have taken permaculture courses or have been in that community. I think we're drawing from a lot of different circles here tonight, those who are live and those who are watching the recording. I've been doing permaculture for a little over 25 years, so my whole adult life. And in the last 10, 15 years, something that has been just missing for me personally in the process of designing landscapes and farms and gardens and working with community and cities is that deeper connection, that deeper ancestral relationship to the traditions that allowed us to be here. The ancient ways, right? Before the Industrial Revolution, there were people have been living in harmony on Earth for tens of thousands of years, and we had these we have still the remnants of these amazing wisdom traditions. Where if you think about what those old traditions, when they think about abundance, so much of what emerges in old cultures is based on survival because you gotta make it through the winter. You gotta make it through you gotta survive the predators. And so everything was woven. It's not like we could separate the act of growing food from the work that we do. It was enmeshed. And when you speak, Brandy, I hear the echoes of a woven viewpoint, a way of being, we're not just talking about it, we're living it, we're being it, and we're calling to those old traditions. And for me, abundance is something that can be intentional. One, it's here in nature. I can walk out in the garden right now and there's an abundance of flowers and butterflies and bees and birds and there's food falling on the ground and it's here. The sun is shining, the fog is rolling in. It's all abundant. But when I think about human systems and I think about the struggles that we have in our social fabric, it's apparent that abundance can be taken away, it can be given. There's people who have and people who don't have. And um and so this kind of brings us to the theme of why we are doing this session, which is that the realization that we can design for abundance or we can design for destruction. And so much of what we experience in the human world is actually by design. And so I want to bring it back to you, Brandy, and ask the question of how, in terms of the way human culture is currently, uh, how does design specifically play a role in the kind of abundance we may or may not have in the world? Like, how is design a power of intention to affect the world? You're muted.
Hmm. Thank you for that, Eric. That's a big one. Again, as I shared, I have the privilege to work at this intersection with programs, policy, place, with architects and developers. And as soon as you said that, in my head popped in the idea of redlining and how we have designed a public infrastructure that has created now a climate crisis based off of fear. And now, as we think about redesigning, right, which we can do, there is an idea of city repair. I'll give a shameless plug there. I think it can happen. Um, However, again, we're in a world. I give the example of this when we think about cities, for example, that have been designed to keep people separate. So, for example, if you go into a Chinatown somewhere, have you noticed in the crosswalk? And I'm thinking about Oakland, California, which is where I yelled from. You all born and raised there. And you go down to Chinatown, and just in the sidewalk, folks are walking across the street in this very diagonal way. This design, which allows our bodies to pass each other, where we can look at one another, see each other. And one may look at it because our traditional Western design is straight squares where we're walking past each other in a way that allows us not to look each other in the eye and say hi and even build the relation in this way. And so when I think about just down to the fabric of the design of our cities, some of that design is creating the separation of social design so that we can't remember that we're oneness with the one, that we're all part of nature and that we're all a part of the plant ancestors. And so when I think about a project I worked with Mayor Keisha Bottoms in Atlanta, Georgia, where she was charged with closing the Atlanta City Jail because at the time there were only 33 inmates in a jail, and our city was paying over $30 million a year for 30 inmates in a jail. And she was pushed by local activists to say, close the jail and open up a center of equity. And I had the pleasure to work with the community to reimagine in a place where there was this jail. What does a center of equity look like? How do we take something that has caused harm? And I'm going to tell you now, you all, this was during COVID. So you know how that goes. Also, Mayor Keisha Bottoms, one of the first Black mayors, a female in Atlanta, Georgia. The idea that she had the audacity to hire myself and a group of architects saying that we're designing justice and designing spaces, well, that was already groundbreaking. I'll say that she got COVID, but what is there and what we know, and especially as designers and folks who are thinking about the yet to be born, is that in the city of Atlanta, they have 4 plans that myself and a team of wonderful designers worked on showing what could be in this place instead of a jail, what could be there. And we engage with about 1,000 Atlanta Georgians to co-create those designs. Thinking of it, and I'll tell you, the one that was the most abundant was blow that crap up and let's just put a park and plant some trees. Folks understood that that land needed some healing to regenerate again.
Wow. Wow. So complete retrofit, take down the dark, stagnant stone and metal and release the earth.
And then we don't know waste. I mean, the amazing thing is we work with artists and all the humans. So it was like, we're going to tear stuff down, but we're going to use this stuff to build something else that
I think
really,
that, see now I think that point there, that we can use the medium of oppressive society, of the empire, right? Of the infrastructure that represses the land. We can reuse that to build the gardens, to
Mhm.
build the world that we want, to design for abundance. And I always think about, I've shared this before, some of you may have heard me say this before, but I always think about how we live in this kind of, we're in a world of mass extinction, right? There's animals are going extinct every day. We've lost an enormous amount of biodiversity, and it's heartbreaking. But also, we have hidden tremendous biodiversity underneath all of our asphalt and concrete, because there are seeds that can be viable for thousands and thousands of years. So I think about what happens when we start to open up these spaces, and what seeds are hiding underneath for the generation that's ready for it, that's ready to embrace designing a world of abundance, that's ready to embrace designing a world that cares for people, that cares for the land, that connects us, that takes responsibility for our water, takes responsibility for our waste, takes responsibility for the trauma that we've enacted on our communities. When we're ready, we can actually take that on. That's what's so empowering about the process of design, like in the examples that you're sharing, is that so much of what we're has been inherited in terms of the infrastructure, the cultural infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, was by design. It was on purpose. And don't think for a minute that the political situation, economic situation, and things don't have design plans behind them, right? There's people with agendas and intention, and they move them in a certain direction. Well, we are people too that have that power to plan, to design, to enact projects, to enact healing. And that's why I think the process of permaculture, regenerative design, social justice movements are all part of a redesign of our world. And maybe we've hidden some special resources from ourselves until we're ready.
oh, give thanks. Eric, there was a comment in the chat. Maybe I can just answer around the project and give thanks. I think I just went over it really quickly. This process was a year process. And again, the problem is the solution. What I really braved and supported Mayor Keisha Bottoms, and I just take my hat off. There was an actual a community activators board that was put together, and that board was formerly incarcerated folks who were leading the charge of the community design that we worked with, again, starting with folks who most impacted and then rippling out to other community members, thinking about the different zones of engagement when we think about this idea of social permaculture. But the folks who were most impacted led the design process. What was amazing is during the process, again, there were 33 inmates. And what we found once we got this amazing community activators team, and I'll tell you this, there were over 250 residents who applied to be a part of this board. There was only room for 12. But in the midst of just meeting, they found that 12 of the folks who were incarcerated were there simply because they could not pay the bail. And so we were able to get together with groups and get the bail paid. And so there were release of half the inmates here. Okay. So there was that process. And no, there wasn't just, oh, let's heal the land. Again, there were four different plans, master plans that we shared as a group with the city of Atlanta of what Atlanta Georgians thought. And one of them that folks really voted on was like, let's blow this up and take the services, the resources that we need and distribute them throughout the community. Some folks wanted a one-stop shop. There were many different designs. What was beautiful was that it was a co-creation, and the folks who were most impacted were at the helm. It wasn't let the designers go in the back. And I'll just say this, folks love to work with me, and sometimes I can push a bit, but everyone from the warden to the folks who were behind were in engagement sessions together. And folks said, Brandi, the warden is your friend. Again, the problem is the solution. And I'll be quiet with this, but here's what we'll find. I don't believe, I am an abolitionist, so I should say that out loud. I don't believe anything is healed in a cage. And what we found in our investigation of this work and working with wardens is that actually most folks didn't grow up saying they wanted to be a warden, but it was a design. In fact, most wardens in interviews we found were people that either were going to end up in jail, so they figure they become a warden. They only needed a GED. They're working class folks, and half their family members are in jail. So maybe they join this so that they can protect their family. Either they were going to be the warden or they were going to be murdered. So what we found in this is that what else do we need to build as we think about reimagining justice? We understand accountability and restorative justice is a real thing, but is it a prison? When we began to reimagine, we didn't just engage with prisoners, we had to engage with everybody. Again, engagement is all of the ecosystem. Again, I believe the project was a bit before its time, but I remind people I'm doing this work thinking about the yet to be born and the being born, the children that lie in the three daughters that of mine who've yet to come. And so I know that those plans exist, and that as they exist, that this then can happen. When we can't be wed to it. You all know that that was a big deal just to be able to push an initiative. And I'll say this, what odd partners. We had partners groups like Bloomberg. And so like we're think designing and resilience. So also thinking about what are the edges that we need to think about when we think about abundance and redesign to work with. Never in a million years thought I'd be doing design work with Bloomberg and different organizations and the jail.
Wow. Wow. It's such an important message that you're bringing, Brandi, because when I think about some of the other things that have happened that we can celebrate, like the removal of all the dams on the Klamath River. Klamath River has been freed. Young indigenous folks, for the first time in generations, have canoed the river in its entirety just recently, and that's a huge celebration. But you know what? That was decades of getting ranchers, loggers, indigenous folks, farmers, political people all to the table. Everyone had to be at the table for that to happen. Everyone. People who were against each other. And we live in a time where it's a highly polarized cultural environment right now, especially in the United States. How are we going to bring us all to the table to redesign this future? That's just a
Mm,
question I think about all day, every day.
yeah. Yeah. My question is always, how do we value the difference and create unity? Because I think often we think of this idea of we're all just one and we get, I'm from California. Well, we're just one cuddle puddle, one big melting pot. And I say, well, we're more like a chef salad, you know? We have all the different ingredients and you need every little piece of it to make it a chef salad here. But because if anything is missing, it ain't no good. But the integrity together makes with some goodness, right? Like it makes that goodness. And so how do we value that difference and create unity with it? And what does it mean to value difference?
Mm, that's beautiful. Brandy, I want to invite you to bring up your little presentation and keep nourishing this conversation there.
Hmm. Let me see here. I'm going to go back up to this slide here. Here we go. Share out. Here we go. And share. How are we doing? Can you all see that?
Yeah,
Thanks. Well, I'm just first of all thanking everybody for coming in, especially think about New York, and think about abundance and time. And you could be doing something else with quote unquote time. That's the thing we often feel like there's never enough of. And I shared this original slide because when Erik called me and said, "Hey, B, let's just check in and talk about designing about abundance and what does that look like in permaculture world?" And this is just a quick slide to this idea of the word even permaculture came into my world, hanging out with this amazing woman, Starhawk, in this picture. And there's a Charles is in this picture here, and this is back some moons ago. And I think we were singing, of course, or doing some sort of a fun ritual together. And this picture is abundance. Like that it was like, oh, look at behind the backdrop, the humans is one thing, but when you look at the backdrop, as my grandpa would say, there's food as far as the eyes can see, right? What does that look like? I think about abundance, and I share this slide because I stand on the shoulders of my ancestors. We think about people care, earth care, fair share. And when we say Sankofa, it simply means go back and fetch it. That I am standing and someone has already tilled the soil. In fact, there's no more soil coming from Mars. My ancestors, they're there. So I first say, I know that there's abundance because, as Harriet would say, free or die. And the fun fact that I think about, we think about Harriet Tubman, and we know she was definitely an abolitionist. But I don't know if folks remember that she also was an herbalist, as the utopian and eco goddess. They said Mama B, she had to know about the herbs and the different salves, walking people through the forest to freedom. And here we are now understanding this idea of abundance. Um, I share with you in my work, again, as I shared, I'd love to engage with people, design. And in the corner here, you'll see this is the work we did. We see the circle. I hopefully you can see my cursor there. When we were in Atlanta, Georgia, designing with folks who were system impacted city planners, thinking about what does it look like to create a center of equity in this old rusty jail. And we had dice and colors and games and imagination and freedom. And folks are going, whoa, we didn't realize this was such a big building. To be able to dispel the built environment to community that often are just actors in it, right? And you don't realize, why do I feel this way? And I often say, you ever wonder, you walk into a room and you start feeling a way? There's a design. It was designed that way. So it definitely shifts your mood and your space. Um, Allensworth, where y'all at in the building? I heard y'all was on the call, and it's so perfect because I'm thinking it was 2015. And here we are, myself and about 15 young girls and families coming from Hunters Point in San Francisco down to the town of Allensworth. If you don't know about Allensworth, you should please know about it. It is a Black town settlement in the state of California. Charles Allensworth, a wonderful space. It has a state park there. And I know we have some folks on the call. They are reactivating this Black town, y'all. Yes, there was a Black town in the state of California. I know we often think out west, and there was actually a couple, but Allensworth for me is a place that we have to remember that we are stewards and not just farmers. That when we think about just that word and think about abundance, when you think about farming something out, separating in lines versus tending and stewarding something. You said it earlier, Eric. You talked about the forest of food and how do we move out of the idea of just farming. In the town of Allensworth, y'all, they were dairy and grain farmers, but more importantly a community, because this is during a town where Black folks had to have a Black town. You heard what I said here. So but here's what to remember about this town. Here's what's amazing about our soil, so loyal, that Booker T. Washington would send maple syrup through this area. This is again during this time we're separate, right? But here we are sharing these goods on the railway. So Allensworth, also near the town Delano, where Cesar Chavez activated, was it's a confluence abundance hub, if you ask me. But also when we go back and think about what it was before the humans were there, before the humans were there. And what do we need to then redo so that we can live in relationship with mama and not just farm her out? That we farmed it out so much that we think we don't have any abundance. We've gone below the water table. But Allensworth is a small town to remember that in this very small town in the midst, right? Was it 2 hours out of Los Angeles? There was a community of folks who were said that they could not be in traditional community. Mind you, these are African American folks coming from the South, where agriculture and food production was everyday life, to the big city of Los Angeles to do these porter jobs. And Charles Allensworth got this swath of land and began bringing back agriculture and land, which is way more kin to the folks who were now in this urban area of Los Angeles. So again, the problem was still the solution for them. This picture is the families that went out to Allensworth in 2015, and we Kemetic yoga. Again, on the ground in the soil with our ancestors. And Miss Pearl Howe was 82, leading of families and folks who had never been camping. And we made ice cream because Charles Allensworth was a dairy and grain farmer. And we ate food. That's what the butterfly movement is. We believe that, people say that as you work in communities, these young delinquent girls, they are stopping. And we actually say, nah, they're the solution. They're the solution. We know that once you get your AI, we call it, if you're equipped with AI, when we think about abundance. I know y'all scared of that word, but I want you to go with me here. I'm talking about the ancestral intelligence. Ancestral intelligence, which is what we do in our work with the butterfly movement, reminding our girls to remember that they're standing on the shoulders of their ancestors. We truly know that it starts in the soil, that we can remediate it. Had the opportunity to work with young girls in areas, Hunters Point, y'all, if you know anything about the state of California and San Francisco, in an area where there's so many studies of soil and lead and contamination, but most importantly, their families and generations that live there. And we know we can remediate soil. And this group of girls and myself had the chance to bring abundance to neighbors who thought we can't grow nothing. We said, give us a bucket and you can grow it. Wherever you at, you can grow some food. There is abundance. And we went and up the and down the hills of San Francisco, brought mulch and soil and seeds to community members to grow food right there on their fire escape. That making the least change for the greatest possible effect. We couldn't get off the hill, so we held a movie night right in the housing authority. We brought the tent out, the families, and we say right there, we will be there. Less change. No one has to move, no worries, and we're still living in abundance. We got the movie night. It feels good. And where some kids were going hungry, these kids that started off working in the garden saying, we hate this garden food, began to come every weekend thinking about what was being cooked and what young chef we were going to feature on the food that they grew in the garden. That at one point they thought, we ain't eating that stuff. It's in the dirt. We don't want to eat any of that stuff. I'm going to skip through a couple of these, y'all. I can go on. But there was one. There's a amazing thing that I think that is important when we think about abundance and redundancy, and how nature just really loves that. And right here is a really amazing colleague, Michelle Lee, Working the Roots. I'm really giving a plug here. It's an amazing book. It's a California guide, African American folks and herbal roots and plant-based medicine. Michelle Lee is a great friend. And during the pandemic, we started a mutual aid. Again, abundance. There's more than enough. One person alone, but together we can. And in East Oakland, as streets were being closed down and families were hungry, we started a Sankofa Garden project. And Michelle Lee and many folks who live in East Oakland came out, and we put front yard gardens and backyard gardens in the back of houses through deep East Oakland, using sheet mulching, sharing seeds, staging, building this abundance in the midst of scarcity as folks were waiting in line. Now we're in year 5, and I can't tell you how I love seeing the pictures that keep coming in from all of these mamas and families that during the pandemic began to say, we growing food everywhere. This Sankofa Gardens went through the state of California, from Fresno all the way. We built boxes together. Folks came in together. The elders can't kneel. We got to go tall. Everybody that we know, the soil is loyal. We sheet mulched and got folks together, and we did what I call the most abundant thing. I have to tell y'all, it's called neighbor labor. Come on, somebody. We do neighbor labor. Hey, and we get together and we ate food. And on the backs of, I mean, if you saw these spaces before, well, parking lots. And we're grateful to work with beloved, amazing land stewards like our beloved Danny Glover and just many folks in community that came together and said, let's make sure that we got food everywhere. You know, I'm not going to over talk, so Eric, give me the look, but I have to share this because, as we were in Allensworth, one of the things working with the youth again, pollution as an unused resource, I want us to say. Now, this seemingly Pringle can that you see here actually doubles as a solar oven. And as we hung out in Allensworth, it yields itself to tons of wonderful sun. And we had youth. And it's my goal always to instigate and be a good troublemaker around eating healthy. But of course, they all wanted hot dogs. And so my thing is if we're going to have hot dogs, well, you got to cook them and you got to create the apparatus. And since you want to have those chips, and so we actually had a great time at what would normally just be the Pringle cans that go away. We created small solar ovens, if you can see here, cutting a top out, throwing a little saran wrap, and we had a little skewer through the hot dogs and set them in the sun and twisted them on. And therefore, no waste. We had more abundance, right? We ain't wasting nothing. And for me, I guess I settled with them being able to have a hot dog. It wasn't the healthiest thing, but the fact they made their oven and cooked it, I was satisfied as the outdoor teacher. And of course, I share with you all the idea of our plant cesters. Eric, you started off, and I believe it to be true for myself, as nature is my spirituality. And I know that we are connected. And I think that the more, and part of our intention in the work with the butterfly movement, my work as a engager and designer is to remind us that we're connected. The human species has this idea that it's so disconnected. So just remembering our plant ancestors and the intentional pieces there, um, thinking about abundance and having the opportunity to go to Africa and work with the Zambian sisters who came here for a conference. Long story short, y'all, the movement is now working with the Bunda women in Iteji in Zambia. They're doing permaculture there now. Excited, and give a plug out to my colleague Hannah Apricot, and who's really helped support. We've now trained about 4 other sisters there in permaculture, and the goal is to go back and do a training. And now they're not giving the land to Monsanto. I was brought there by the chief saying, Brandi, please tell the sisters that they should not sell or let Monsanto touch their land. And we spent time building compost bins and doing amazing work all together. I want to just maybe think about this idea that we go fast alone, but we really go far together. And when I think about abundance, that's what it is, right? Even though, I like to give the example as a mother. I often, I could do it faster. So I'll say, here, just come on, I could do it real quick. But if I keep doing it real quick, one, they'll never learn it and it won't go as far. And so I understand often it's our tendency to say, oh, okay, let me get it done real quick. How many of us do that? Y'all know we do real quick. But you're going to turn around and just be fast all by yourself. And if the goal is to go far, but to be in regeneration, to think about the next generation, then we got to be together. We got to be together. And then we got to think about what does that look like to value the difference, to create unity, to value it. Like, how do you treat your $10 shoes versus your $100 shoes? How do you value those? Think about that. Valuing the difference. When you value something, you spend time with it. You want to understand it. So when we say that idea of value the difference to create unity, that would be my prescription for abundance for humans. Begin to think about who and what you are not valuing, and how can you value it more? Can you read about it, want to know about it, spend time with it? And then you can value that difference. You ain't got to like it, but you can value it. And then you can create some unity with it. And then, well, now we can make a world that's for the next generation and then yet to be born, and do our part. Just do our part. And I'm going to stop sharing there.
Woo! I'm just oohing and on over here the whole time. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Brandi. And value the difference. I need to come away with that. I'm letting that marinate in my heart right now because I feel like that's some deep wisdom there. That's an important message. And now from there, we move into how do we look at the systems of our world, our economy in such a way that we can design for abundance? Because I feel you've touched really well on the inner how we come from, where how we show up for each other, how we look at um, how we value the world. And one thing that I often find in the work that we do, the movement work that we do, the work we do to bring unity, to bring healing, to restore the land, is we end up running up against this challenge constantly. And this challenge that we run up against is a lack of funds, a lack of opportunity, a lack of education, and a sense that the system is just not developed to bring unity and healing. And what I want to say is that it's closer than we think. It's closer than we think. And one of the ways that we can move into a world where we can empower the process of design to transform our economy into one that works for all, one that works for the land, is we can literally look at a set of industries. And this is again, we are so powerful. We have the ability to do this. So a few industries you might look at: landscaping, architecture. I love what you've shared with us about your journey with the architecture family, because that's just huge. Education, healthcare, urban planning, farming. Every one of these industries, and this is just a small list, they are ripe, just ripe for transformation, just ripe to come into alignment with the systems of the planet, to come into alignment with what humans need to feel at peace. And there's a lot of destruction going on inside these realms. But value the difference, right? Value the difference. And maybe that'll lead us somewhere. So one of the places that I have been working for the last couple decades is in the landscape industry. I've taken that on as sort of like the industry that I want to design abundance through. And part of my message here is to get for everyone who's listening to this, for the young folks that will be listening to the recording, to the people that you all are mentoring, those of you who are on this call, you know you're mentoring folks, some of you have your circles, you have your communities that you're working with. And I want to make a strong statement here that the landscape industry is a real ripe place for people to have meaningful work, to start their own businesses, to start their own cooperatives, and get to work designing a world of abundance. And one of the things just here in the United States, we have 40 million acres of lawn in the US, right? If we were able to transform 40 million acres of lawn into food production, nobody in this country would go hungry. I mean, we already know we're growing enough food for everyone in this country, right? 30% of it it gets thrown away as waste. And we grow more food, but again, by design, food isn't getting to communities. So where's the best place to grow food? Your backyard, on your fire escape, in your front yard, right? In your house, in your greenhouse. Like this is the first best place to grow food. And anyone in those neighborhoods won't go hungry. You were talking about, would you say neighbor labor, Brandy? So back in the day, back in the 1999 and 2000, what got me into this work was my organization, Planting Earth Activation, PEA, like the pea plant, right? And we were a bunch of young teens who were scared about the world, concerned about the world. And we decided to create a garden movement. And so what we did was we had what we called GGG, the Great Garden Giveaway. GGG, Great Garden Giveaway. And what we would do is we would take a neighborhood and we would knock on all the front doors. Like people had lawns, and we'd say, "Hey, can we give you a free garden, a free edible garden?" And a lot of folks are like, "Yeah, sure, I'm gonna take a free garden, of course. Like, why would I say no to that?" And we would organize these volunteer days, and we would, on a weekend, we would transform maybe 8 to 10 front yards, all in one neighborhood. All the neighbors would come out, everyone would help each other. We'd have roving musicians going from project to project. We'd have a huge community potluck. Sometimes we got enough signatures to shut down the road officially by the city, and we dumped compost and wood chips in different neighborhoods. And it was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life because the feeling of abundance, not just that we were turning lawns into gardens, but the way we came together for each other, the way we had each other's backs, the way we fed each other, the way we sung to each other. It was like living in a dream. And I got to experience that at the age of 19 and 20 and 21, that this could be the world. This could be the world. And I love that you were talking about Hunter's Point because later on in 2004, when the biotech industry had a big conference in San Francisco, I helped organize the Reclaim the Commons event with a bunch of folks. It was a very, very intense experience, but one of we had 7 straight days of action, and I got arrested. I was in jail. We locked down in front of the Masonic Center and tried to build a garden in the street and all this stuff. It was just crazy. Uh, the best day, the best action after we had done all this work in the streets, direct action, the action of that week that will always stick with me was the day where we went and we built gardens in Hunters Point. And we went to the local newspaper. There's like Hunters Point had like a little publishing house, maybe like a little newsletter or zine or something like that. I forget the name of it. It was like a little independent newspaper in Hunters Point, and we brought our barrels, right? Because the soil's been contaminated. So we brought barrels, we brought compost, and we had the most beautiful day of my life building these gardens there in community. And that's what's possible, right? And that's what's possible. And that's what got me into, well, how can we mainstream? How can we take this and have it not be a hobby, right? Not be something that we have to volunteer for. How do we move this kind of work into a space where young people can have meaningful full work, like do this work, restoring planet, bringing community together. And that's what you get to do to put food on the table for your family, to pay for your gas, pay for your insurance, to, cover your house expenses. How do we turn this action in such a way to a scale where we're now operating at scale? And I was in Europe for a month recently, and I was in Scandinavia. And one of the things you experience in Scandinavia is the way that infrastructure has been designed. The urban planning is some of the most advanced um, uh, 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 urban planning in the world in terms of it's not designed around cars, it's designed around nature and people in a lot of places. And you just get a feeling of that. You don't have to talk to anybody about it. You just walk through the space. There were bus stops with living roofs. Every bus stop in Gothenburg has a living roof on top of it, right? What? Oh, we can do that. So all of the precedents for what's possible is out there. Look at what's happening in Rwanda. Rwanda is like one of the most cutting edge countries on planet Earth right now in terms of caring for natural resources, caring for people, and developing abundance. They are an example of what's possible, especially on the heels of such tragic events in the last century. So we know it's possible, but how do we move from here to there? And so I want to offer that transforming industry, even though it doesn't sound very sexy, it's like not super exciting, like landscaping. Yeah, I said, oh, landscape. Well, that sounds pretty boring. But you know where landscapers end up? They end up at the table with city council members, mayors, business leaders, schools, nonprofit organizations, all the stakeholders that are making land use decisions. People who are in the landscape world can have a seat at that table because it's an acceptable industry. And so now what we're doing is we're finding that we can sort of infiltrate circles where people are making decisions that impact community. And we can infiltrate that with the wisdom of the earth. And that's what I often say is my job is to be a voice of the earth. And if I can get at the table where people are making decisions to either destroy a watershed, if I can nudge them or others who can get to that table can nudge them to actually change how they're designing and approaching that work, that's powerful. It's incredibly powerful. So here, as we look at the landscape industry, it's $100 billion industry a year. Um, it's trillions of gallons of water are used every year just for the lawns. And we, but we can do it differently. Like this picture here is a budding farm. So we get to design and build farms all over California. It's one of the greatest joys in life, to work with folks who want to do right by the earth. But not only that, who understand the value that food and water and that loyal soil has to the health of communities, to the health of our children. And we can be participants in that process of healing, by literally transforming these industries. So we can transform agriculture. And this is actually a concept plan that we did for Allensworth, and is part of the work of the Allensworth Progressive Association and the incredible work that they're doing. And right here, like I wanted to share a few things around agriculture that are cutting edge, that are represented here in this plan, because we don't have to grow our food in such a way where we pollute the water and destroy the soil and eviscerate life. We can do the opposite. We can build soil and have more nutrients and sequester carbon. And so some of these ways that we implement that, and again, this is probably has more precedent than the landscape industry side. Landscape is still a little bit behind. Agriculture now, we've got regenerative agriculture movements and natural agriculture movements that have really taken off around the world. But we're looking at large scale agroecological design, holistic grazing, keyline planning. I'm just kind of touching on some things just to remind you, probably a lot of folks here, you've already heard of all this stuff. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I just want to remind you that we can do this. And there are projects that are taking place, even here in California, even in the Central Valley, that are bringing together the threads. How do you care for community? How do you grow food for the people? How do you care for the soil? How do you care for the water? How do you do it in such a way where there's more abundance through this process than less, where we give back more than we take? I was in a circle today with folks from my tradition, which is a Nordic folk tradition of the land. And we were um, one of our principles in how we work, one of the most ancient principles that has been passed down for hundreds of generations. The one way to survive is reciprocity. And with reciprocity is the notion that you give more than you take. So how do we show up in the work where we're not extractive, not extracting from community, not extracting from the land, not extracting from water, but the touch, the breath, the heart that we leave the in our wake actually creates more abundance. It actually generates more water, more soil, more joy, more happiness, more love, and it's possible if we approach things through the lens of reciprocity. Um, I'm going to wrap it up here in a second. We're going to open it up to discussion, but I wanted to just share a couple more things. This is the city hall in the town where I live, right, is right here, Sebastopol City Hall, and right over here, this brick building to the right is the Sebastopol Library. So this is a public garden, and it was once just a pretty dead, desolate garden that provided pretty much no function. It was just got weed whacked a few times a year. Um, and we had an opportunity to sit down and work with the city of Sebastopol, to work with architects, to work with community members and artists. And over a 2-year process, we developed a public food forest here for the community. And we did it in such a way that honored the legacy of this community. We broke it into 4 parts. Do I have that? No. We have an indigenous food garden here. We have an agrarian food garden, so kind of looking at the different phases of time. This is a cultural history garden. You walk through this garden and you could go back in time into the different agricultural relationships that took place here. And Luther Burbank was operating here, so we have a Luther Burbank garden, and then we had sort of the modern day permaculture garden. And so the community can come and feed off of this public garden anytime. This lemon hedge here is just totally established and abundant. People need lemons. So this is what's possible when we come together. Somebody in one of the comments mentioned something about general plans, and I think this is a really important piece, is part of how we can redesign our public infrastructure, is by taking over the local government. And this has been happening in a lot of places around the world. It's happened here in my community. We can literally take over our local governments. And this is in many ways more powerful than national politics. I mean, that's like a whole other conversation, but it's something that's tangible. It's something that you can do. You can actually accomplish this. You can get folks who have ecological wisdom and community organizing skills elected to your city council, elected to your mayorship, and you can influence them. And you can get folks who have these skills hired as city staff and county staff. And when we do that, we can redesign our communities from the inside out. And there's precedents all over the country and all over the world, of this exact thing. And this is what happened here, is that we took over the local government with folks who had an ecological wisdom, who are community focused, and they became the drivers to make this project happen. And the general plans are 20-year plans that cities and counties create to look forward 20 years ahead. How do we manage development? How do we manage the economy? What sorts of cultural design do we have? And so we can take over those general plan processes as well if we pay attention to what's happening in those spaces, get on the boards, or get friends on the boards, and work for your community. I was on the General Plan Advisory Committee for the city of Sebastopol for a little while, and they were wanting to talk about managing flooding because the bottom of the city floods. And I brought up the idea of, what if everybody managed their own water on their land, right, where they lived? There's thousands of homes here. What if they all caught water in tanks and had that as security and managed it in the landscape? We would keep hundreds of millions of gallons of water out of the flood zone that way. And so these are the kinds of things that we can seed into the planning process in our communities that can make an enormous difference. We are the difference makers. We just have to choose to act and and develop these hubs. Mm, I'll just leave you with this. I don't believe that I don't believe that we can't restore and heal the degraded land. and the degraded communities. I firmly believe that we can restore what's been degraded. And I would never sign off on saying, well, that neighborhood is too far gone, fuck it. It's like, let's move somewhere else. No way. No way. Every patch of land is sacred. And I think this is a something that we who want to do this work in the real world need to remember. I had a mentor when I was 20. Alan Capular, Mushroom Capular, co-founder of Seeds of Change, founder of Peace Seeds, an amazing, amazing human. May he rest in power. And he told me, he said, Erik, it's great to go out and manage the land and do all this beautiful work. And he said, but if you're not restoring the degraded places of the earth, then you haven't taken responsibility for your wisdom, for your privilege, for your knowledge, for your power. And that has just hit me so hard at that age. And it's been with me ever since that we can turn parking lots like this parking lot into abundant food forest systems that feed the people and feed the community. We can depave the land. We can build green, well, wildlife and walking corridors. We can daylight creeks and streams. And to do that, we have to think big for deep change. Think the way Brandi thinks. Brandi, you are such an inspiration when I hear you talk about the work that you do and the wisdom and the message that you bring. It's water. It like nourishes the work, and the path, and gives new meaning, especially value the difference. Wow, everybody, if you take anything from this session, like take that home. I will just mention that one of the things we're doing with Earth Activist training is we have the Regenerative Landscaper course that follows this book I wrote, The Regenerative Landscaper. Basically, it's a book on a 500-page manual on how to restore planet Earth. With a lot of tangible stories, and there's a lot of diverse voices in the book. It's not just my voice. And I have this online course that's going to follow the book starting this fall. So check that out in the Earth Activist training. Charles will put the link up there somewhere. But now let's get out of here and let's come back and chat. We've got a little bit of time left. I would love to hear from you all. I'd love to hear your questions, your inspirations, your concerns, your comments, and feel free to unmute yourself. We'd love to hear your voices, see your lovely faces. Please join us.
Thank you, Erik. Every time I love it when you can get inspired and work with folk together. So thank you for what you just offered us. And you say it very lightly. And I just want to invite folks again for the opportunity to be participants versus spectators in redesigning a planet that works for all of us. And well, thank you for reminding all of us that we can. Yeah. But yeah, let y'all talk. I have 10 things I want. Like, I have a little sticky note. I start writing stuff down when Erik was talking, like, wait a minute, what about this? The future. Building the least desirable spot on the piece. Let me
Caleb,
see.
did you have something?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I just was thank you both very much. This is really beautiful. Um yeah, I think what is powerful for me, like that I'm piecing together in the work that you do, is like the simultaneous opportunity to use permaculture or these different things as it's also like a mechanism of healing for the communities and the people that are involved. And it's almost like a metaphor. And I think that's really beautiful how you're using this work not only to kind of, restore the land, but also it's, healing for the people that are involved. Um, and one of the reasons why I'm on this presentation, I'm kind of in like a career change. I've actually been an interior designer for a while, almost 20 years here in New York. And um, I love design, I love nature, but I'm trying to move into something that bridges things a little more meaningfully. And so this has been really insightful. Yeah, so I guess if you have any insight or suggestions for me in my kind of path and what I'm trying to do and bridge these things and be more purposeful and intentional. And I love the idea of permaculture. I've never done it. But I love the idea of being connected to nature, restoring land, and also using it as a, a way of healing and transformation for groups, for people. I'm not quite sure what all of that looks like or how it plays into my past as like a high-end, residential interior designer. But yeah, this was a really beautiful conversation for me to see what you all are up to, and thank you.
Mm. Caleb, you say interior designer. Of course, the biophilic energy in me comes out in thinking
Oh
about
yeah.
design and space, and internal design and how we design internal spaces to create and keep the continuum of nature. And it's a
Mhm.
pretty big job to think about how to create the permanent culture when we think about interior design today.
Mhm.
And what does that look like?
It's
Um,
hard, the challenge I have, at least with the business that I've been in, and I've actually own the business. It's not been easy for me to move into that space. I mean, I've studied biophilia. I've actually done presentations on biophilia and biomimicry and all of these things, trying to use healthier materials in the projects and things like that. Um, it's not been an easy space for me to move into. I mean, I think at my core, I do want to at least kind of explore landscape and permaculture and things because I just love being connected to earth in that way. But yeah, I mean, there is a big opportunity in interior design. It's just not, I think one of the challenges that we have, and it may be this way in your field as well, is getting people to understand why it's important and why it makes a difference, or why, I think a lot of times what I've observed in at least the interiors industry is companies and firms, they're very concerned about checking the boxes and meeting the criteria, but their heart's not actually connected to why it's important. And so that's kind of a challenge I've seen. But, I've tried with clients and different things. And at the end of the day, they want what they've seen us do already. And it's kind of hard to move into that space. But yeah, it's challenging for me at this point in my career as a creative to want to work with more purpose and to kind of be in this space, in this conversation, and contribute in this way, and kind of being hung here, um, that's kind of the chapter I'm in. And so I'm kind of, it's again why I wanted to hear you all today and what you're doing. And
Stoked you're here, Caleb, and great questions. And you and I have a one-on-one session we're
I
going to do,
did, I
right?
did, yeah, I think
All right.
so.
Well,
I
I'm going to
did.
save my comments for you for that
Okay.
and take a couple other questions. And I'll be thinking about, I'm so glad you came tonight and shared,
Thank
and
you, Eric.
about you, and look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Thank you,
Um,
Eric.
next up is Ludmila. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right. And then we've got someone else after that, Yvonne. Okay, Ludmila.
So one of the things that I was really struck by was in the examples you used of successful um, actions, is that it wasn't based on a money economy. Um, you had things based on basically a social economy, um, and some of the um, I dropped this in the chat when you asked what abundance looked like, and for me, I actually did some real deep thinking, and I what I've come up with for myself is really an expansion of the triple bottom line instead of just doing people, money, um and the environment, which is huge. A lot of people out there really surprisingly haven't heard of the triple bottom line, or they're just starting to get wind of it. But I looked at, well, what might be more in others things in there, and for me, I came up with like a 5-pointed thing. I just 5 is a number that's working for me. But it was interesting because I looked up when I googled triple bottom line, it was different, you know, answers that came up. And then surprisingly, when I looked up, well, what about quadruple? What about quintuple? And surprisingly, there were answers there on Google. And but I went, or things that other people are using. So I went with the ones that I wanted to have for my life, like because what do I want my life to look like? Anyways, what I want to say is looking at that abundance that's not based on a on a on a on a monolithic on a monoculture survival of the money economy, okay, but finding other ways to survive. And I'm going to say, particularly going into the times we have ahead where social programs have been cut, grant things have been cut, things are getting kind of ugly and kind of messy up there at the federal level, of things that where there have been, we have had a culture of providing for different kinds of ventures, and that's getting kind of messed with right now. For me, there's a lot of wisdom in how to go with social economies that aren't dependent on money, especially when the money comes from or through or is controlled by Big Brother or whatever you want to call it. And just not being dependent on that, because they can use that to decide which projects are going to get going forward or not. And I don't want to be dependent on their choices as far as what I'm going to do. So yes, the money is useful. It's good to not ignore that, because that is around. But the social thing, and as far as for people to decide what their survival points are that they're based on, and I'm going to say for other people, it might have a point or more that are about music or about other things. The points that I've chosen wouldn't necessarily be the same for other people. Other people might have things that are really strongly rooted in other values as well. So I've gone on a bit. Thank you for hearing me. I do want to say one thing is that really is a contributor is scalability. Looking at what scale to do things on, and I think a lot of people will spend too much money or too little money, or too much money or too much time on if you miss scale something. So something can be scaled intentionally, and you can save a lot of time and effort and be more successful if you do it properly.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, my only comment on that is I appreciate how you're, kind of saying like that's for you, right? And everybody's showing up to that question differently, depending on context. We all have our own context that we bring to the table. And um, I think that one conversation that has been had in the various movements over the years is this conversation about, stepping out of the money system or working within the money system. And that will probably be something that we'll be discussing for multiple generations still. And I like what you say about, in permaculture, we call it plan redundancy. You've got your out of the money stuff that's over here. You got your foot in this, you got your foot over here in this world. But then over here, you've got the one where, because one thing that became apparent to me long ago is that if we don't design in ways to use the money system to restore earth and community, we're going to leave most people behind. Most people are going to be left behind because they're trapped in that cycle. And that's a concern that I've always had deeply. That because I volunteered for years of my life. And honestly, when you volunteer that much, after a while, if you wake up, you realize that's a privileged fucking place to be able to volunteer, right? That's a privileged place. A lot of people are still working 7 days a week. So having that plan redundancy and having your foot in both those worlds is a key part of this transition that we're in. Yvonne, you're next. Woo! Just have to unmute yourself.
Hey, there we go. I don't know. I just wanted to say thank you. I have really enjoyed this talk. I use the word abundance a lot in my workings. I am a grower and an herbalist, and I lead workshops and such about growing and herbalism, and I make journals, and I wear a lot of hats. But we live in a world of abundance, and it's just that so many people don't know how to take advantage of what's just at our doorsteps. We have a stagnant mindset instead of a growth mindset to look out and find these things. And yes, we live in a money-based society and capitalism and all of that. But I offer my things, I offer things for cost because my time costs things and things cost money. But I do also offer free, and I don't ask for anything. If I don't want money to be a barrier for someone to learn how to forage, like that doesn't make sense to me. Absolutely. This is knowledge that we should have had that was taken from us. So it's time to get back to that. So I don't know, but I just wanted to thank you. Forming community is really, really important. Community is how we will get through the next however many years until whatever. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving. And Erik, you said something in your presentation. Yvonne just said it again. It's, we give it reciprocity. So that's something that I think is so essential. Often when I work with youth in the garden, I remind them that we have to ask, we're not going to take all of the plant. You don't take all of her, to check in. Like,
I tell people to ask, to be thankful, and to eat like a deer. Like, don't take a whole bunch from one area. You're gonna a little bit low impact, and just be thankful. There's one particular area that I love to forage in that has it's Piscataway land, and there is an area where it's very customary to leave an offering to Turkey Kayak, who was the leader of them up until I think he passed away in like the 80s. But it's important to do, to be thankful to the earth and the abundance that we have.
Leaving that offering, I just have to say one more little thing. And Priscilla, we're going to go to you. You'll be our last question, and we're going to end with Brandi telling us about an amazing event coming up here in the fall. But has anyone ever read the book Primary? Oh, shoot, what is the name of that thing? All right. Well, has anyone ever read the book The Secret Life of Plants? Anyone read that? Secret Life of Plants? Okay. So part of the work there is based on primary preconceptions. I can't think of the name exactly of it. It's a guy who was just check this out. Stick with me for one sec. This is so freaking awesome and key. There was a guy who was a law enforcement polygraph guy who just had the brilliance one day to start hooking plants up to the polygraph and to start doing different experiments, like giving them things or threatening them. And long story short, what he discovered over years of this was that plants have direct telepathic communication with people, like scientifically proven. And so when I think about the old ways that we're keeping alive, like making offerings before you harvest and singing a song, and in my tradition, if we're going to harvest something for medicine, we tell it what we're going to use it for before we harvest it. So, this is the part that I want to use, and this is what I'm using you for. Please and thank you, and here's an offering. And so, but if you go back to the science piece, right? If you need that to believe in the work in the power of this, you'll see that actually they respond. They literally respond, and their chemical structures will change depending on how you approach. So sorry for that. You inspired me. Priscilla.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think really mostly what I want to say is thank you. I think what struck me was abundance became a verb. Abundance became an intention and how we are in relation to other people and the things around us and how the actions we take um, in whatever spaces. So I feel like I've got, it sort of shifts my whole perspective. I think I spent a lot of time in the last 8 years in the pretty much the conventional retail space, where people are struggling with the way it is, the given setup of going to work, making enough to live, and you see people sometimes give up their dreams or postpone them or stuff, and you wonder if they'll be able to get back. And it's this feeling that it's not workable, that you don't have you don't have a way to change it. And so I think this was a breath of fresh air that even something like looking outside and seeing the abundance out there, that can be transformed into receiving a teaching or creating a foundation, for your own creativity. And Brandi, I just got to say, the creativity and some of the things that you were saying, the plancestors and uh, there are a bunch of those in there, neighbor labor and stuff like that. Yeah,
Soil is loyal, Mama
yeah,
B.
yeah, yeah. It just really shows. Uh,
Mm.
I don't know how you're working, the way you're working with these concepts, and just you're growing and blossoming and spreading seeds all around. So thank you so much.
Ah, Shay, give thanks, beloved. 2016 Earth Activist Training. I think I saw you put that in there. And I'm just giving, I want to say, the problem solution keeps coming up for me. And I say that to say that I think we have more than enough, actually, y'all. We have more than enough. And that this idea, these selection pressures that are happening right now, and this idea of what's going on in the planet is such an opportunity actually right now for us to get together and think about how we can shift it. And so I just keep thinking about that. I wanted to share with you all because I feel like you're so special, a special treat, and you can't share with anyone. It's called the abundance. And you do this abundance, and it really supports the growth of your plant, sisters. And so when you're going out and you're getting ready to plant a seed, you got to do the abundance, abundance. Go down, come up, abundance, abundance, right? From down and up. I want to thank you, Eric, for inviting me to just keep talking about abundance. It's energy. I want to welcome folks to be a part of the Rural Justice Summit that I am excited to be hosting in California at UC Merced. And we say rural justice, y'all. When we think about jail towns across our country that are in rural small communities where we are often looking the other way, we are thinking about urban design, but I want us to think about our rural communities. And most importantly, I want us to think about how we're all connected. We drinking in the watershed together, y'all. And how do we need to think about working together, especially as us land stewards and folks who are saying we can make a turnaround. We can take the desert and bring some rainforest back. We can do it. But it's not going to be segmented like suburban, urban, you over there do this. I have to tell you, we're all drinking from the same water. There's watersheds we're sharing. So the Rural Justice Summit is just that. It's a place for urban, rural communities who are thinking about justice, but we're centering farmers in the Central Valley of California, which I ain't gonna tell some of y'all, but you already know that's where a lot of the food is coming from for the whole planet, really. And it's a place that we're often just driving by. We don't look by and say hi. We go to LA to the Bay. And I'm here to say that Eric is designing and doing work with Allensworth. We're thinking about how many more trees, that yes, the valley was a lake, and how do we love her again? How do we love her again so that the humans could be better companion crops, human species, to the planet we call Earth, in the middle of a universe, if you forgot? Right now, we are on one of the planets. That's the part that every now and again, when you are living in, I just want you to stop for a second, go, whoa. I'm in the middle of a universe on a planet, and there's many of them. And I'm a cosmic possibility. Whoa. There's that. If you forgot abundance, just right there.
Giving me just chills all over my body with that, Brandi. So grateful to you all for being here. Brandi, thank you so much for coming out tonight and sharing your words and your heart and your wisdom and your work. And thanks to all of you for bringing your heart and your work and your wisdom here to the circle. And hope to see you at the World Justice Summit or one of these other programs, or find us on social media. You know, Brandi and I are both fairly active on Instagram. Um, and would just love to stay connected, keep building these relationships, and work together to really we know what's possible, right? I mean, after tonight, at least we can dream into what's possible. We see what has actually been achieved already, and that's just the beginning. We're just planting seeds of possibility here. So I hope we can all nourish this abundant world for all people and all life that we're growing together. And I hope you all have a beautiful, wonderful night, and stay in touch. Many thanks.
Give thanks, y'all. Be blessed and be the blessing. They both work.
Beautiful. Good night.
Thank y'all.